Awesome. Thank you so much, Paige. I'm an alcoholic, and thank you for those kind words. And thank you to everyone who's done service and made this meeting possible. And kind of before the meeting, we were talking about like, hey, I was kind of asked to do 6 and 7, but like some people are at 4 and some people are at 5. And I was kind of like, listen, I can be flexible, which is interesting because I think for me, really horrific rigidity and structure is probably a glaring defect of character that I have, but we'll talk about that in a bit. But really what I could do to kind of set the stage for 6 and 7 and to touch upon 4 and 5 and even tie into 6 and 7 is I have this metaphor that I talk about, and it's the hoarder's house metaphor. And it's this metaphor that I use to describe steps 4, step 5, and 6 and 7. And so maybe I'll lead in with that and then get into 6 and 7 and talk on that for a bit, unless there's objections, because I am open to, I guess, objections. So here's the thing. My experience is that at the depth of who I am, at the core of my being, there is a house, and it is a spiritual house. It's a spiritual entity. And if you have a house at the core of your being, I want you to know that it's good. So at the depth of who you are, I truly believe it is good. It is valuable. It is inherently worthy. If that's in the depth of me, I believe that's in the depth of you. But the problem is, and now I'm just talking about me, is I am a bit of a hoarder. Like I have a hoarding problem, you guys, and it is bad. And so I don't hoard physical things. What I hoard is things like defects and shortcomings. Defects are shortcomings, but I hoard these things. And in my spiritual house, which again is good, which is worthy, which is valuable, which has been created by the ultimate architect, the ultimate designer. I have these things, and I'm sure all you lovely folks that are joining us here today would never relate to this, but I have these things called resentments. Anyone? Some resentments? Yeah, we've been writing some inventory. Yeah. So for me, resentments, they're like newspapers. You know, those old newspapers that are piled all the way from floor till ceiling, and they're decades old. And what happens is when those newspapers are piled from floor to ceiling, it blocks out the windows and the light can't come in. And I find that I'm alone in that house in darkness. And in the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a number of ways in which it offers for us to approach and conceive of that power, which is God. And one of my favorite is light, because light is not what I see. Light is the way in which I see. And if I do this work, everything changes. Everything changes, and yet nothing changes. The way in which I see the world changes. And that is what is on offer here in Alcoholics Anonymous, or as the result of taking the directions, the plain, precise directions out of this book. But I got these newspapers, and they're all the way up to the ceiling, and they're blocking out that light, and it can't come in. And then I know that nobody here could ever possibly relate to this, but I got these things called fears, just riddled with them, and they are like empty bottles and cans. You know those empties? We know. And it's all over the floor. And see, I can't take a step in that darkness and see where I stand and see where I step without clanging and clattering and stepping on those bottles and cans. And what happens is it sounds bigger and louder than it really is. And it becomes overwhelming. And I'm alone in the darkness. And then again, no one here, you're all upstanding, wonderful people. But I've got this stuff called sex conduct. And it's a little like the dead cats behind the freezer. You know what I mean? Like, I know they're there, but I really don't want to acknowledge it. Now, I also want you to know that no actual cats were harmed in the making of this metaphor. It is only a metaphor. But you know what happens with that is the black mold and that shame, it just builds and it gets on the walls. And so what I'm doing in the fourth step is nothing less and nothing more than simply a fact-facing and a fact-finding mission. I'm just there to see the truth about the stock in trade. I'm there to clear away the wreckage of what is deep inside of me. And so I go and I start taking down those newspapers and I start putting them into bags and into boxes. And as I do that, I have a look at those newspapers. And what I find out is the information was wrong the whole time. For years, I thought the story was that you were wrong. Nope. Turns out I am wrong. I was wrong. That is me constantly wrong. And so I start to clear that away. And as I do, more and more light gets into that house. And as the light comes in, I can see where I stand and I can see those bottles and those cans. And what I do is one by one, I pick them up and I throw them into the bags and into the boxes. And I see that how if I rely on this light, I don't have to stand in fear and I will be okay. And I clear that up. And then I deal with the cats and the mold. And I come up with this ideal that I ask the loving and powerful God that I found as the result of taking these actions to lead me towards. And so that I never have to do that again. I never have to live in that way again. And I can be a responsible spiritual pet owner. And so what happens is in the fifth step, when I share this stuff with God and with another human being, I'm taking all that garbage, all that mess, and I'm taking it out of the house. And more light gets in. And what I do, and really, 6 and 7, what 6 and 7 is all about is about having that garbage and that junk at the curb, and then becoming willing, and then simply asking for the garbage man to come and take it away. That's it. That's all I'm doing. And so one of the things is when I got here, I heard 6 and 7, and I heard 5, 6, and 7. And in step 5, what am I meant to do? I meant to share the exact nature of my wrongs. Okay. And then in step 6, I'm becoming willing. And so I'm going to become willing. And then what I'm going to do in step 7 is I'm going to ask. And I had these questions. I'm like, okay, what's the difference between the exact nature of my wrongs? What is a shortcoming and how does that differ from a defective character? And this is just my experience. And you know what I'll say? If you disagree with me, you're right. You're right. I'm wrong. But this is just my experience. That the exact nature of my wrongs, my shortcomings, and my defects of character are very simply the same thing. Because it wouldn't make sense for me to share with you and the God of my understanding one thing, and then become willing to have that power take away a second other thing, but then ask for a third thing to be removed. Now, I will say, on self-will, that level of alcoholic complexity is absolutely in my wheelhouse. That is absolutely what I would do and how I would run things. But what makes sense is for me to share with you, another human being. And I think I'm really emphasizing that because I think a lot of us, we have a lot of fear around step 4, probably because we don't want to do step 5. Because I think the things inside of me are so bad and so shameful that I'm somehow separate. I'm somehow different and I'm somehow isolated from you. And you couldn't possibly know the things that I've done. And if I share them with you, you'll surely judge me. But my experience is we've all done it. And I'll talk about this maybe a little later on, but there isn't a thing that I haven't heard. And there's some stuff that probably I haven't done. And maybe I did it a whole bunch. And I'm just somebody who came to this place of hopelessness. And so 6 and 7 They are these absolutely transformational steps, and they're exciting. And there is a level of enthusiasm that we can have around 6 and 7. And you can kind of tell that we love 6 and 7. Like there's something about 6 and 7 that I feel like people like us, we just grab on to, because we got like in the 12 and 12, like people are like, oh, you have to read 6 and 7 in the 12 and 12. And then there's like other books. It's funny, I'm not going to talk about those. I'll just talk about the big book. But we get excited about 6 and 7, and we're like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm with you. I'm here for that. I'm here for the enthusiasm. So to share with you the enthusiasm, let's get started in 6 and 7. Woo! With the quiet hour. Yeah. Woo, woo, woo. Pew, pew, pew. Quiet hour. Yeah. Which I love, because it's there's a couple like holidays in North America today where there'd be lots of fireworks. So I'm like, quiet hour, firework, pew, pew, pew. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just kind of going to go through the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm going to read, and I'm just going to share my experience. And so where I'm at in the book is on page 75. And it says, returning home. So this is after we've experienced the step 5 promises. Actually, you know what? I was given slight permission to talk about more than 6 and 7. I mean, and talking about most people, myself included, the fear that I had was based around like, man, I don't want to do that 5th step. I'm surely going to be judged. Let's start with the step 5 promises. They're pretty great. So it says we pocket our pride and go to it. So we go and we do that 5th step, and we share the contents of our inventory and those deep, dark secrets within ourselves with God and another human being. That's what we do. And it says illuminating. That's another light metaphor. I just love those. Illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step withholding nothing, we are delighted. And that is our experience, that if I get honest and I get thorough and I get fearless about sharing this stuff, man, I am delighted. That is what's on offer. We can look the world in the eye. I maybe shouldn't necessarily do a show of hands on this, but if your first meeting was an in-person meeting, did you look anyone in the eye? Because I know I didn't. My eyes were glued to the floor. And I was hoping nobody would come and talk to me. And I was hoping I was like almost invisible, right? But now I can look the world in the eye because I am now a part of this world. And I always was, but now I feel it. And it says we can be alone at perfect peace and ease. And man, I am just going to bounce all the way around. So if we go back to page 1 in the big book, we talk about how Bill Wilson, he says this line, I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. And so one of the things is I reference that feeling of loneliness as a beautiful and wonderful description of the spiritual malady. And what I mean by that is that sense of separateness from the God of my understanding. Because again, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, but whatever, we'll do a show of hands. Has anyone here ever felt alone in a room full of people? Right? Yeah. Has anyone here ever felt alone in a relationship? And I'll just speak for me, because I know you guys might not want to do a show of hands on this one. Has anyone here ever felt alone in the middle of an act of intimacy? Because that is my experience. And so for me, loneliness has far more to do about my disconnection from God. And so now, page 1, Bill's experience, which mirrors my experience, right? I need alcohol to kill that loneliness. But page 75 is the result of taking these steps, of taking this action. I can be alone at perfect peace and ease. I'm physically alone, but I'm not alone. Our fears fall from us. That's incredible. Those fears falling. And man, that falling is really what my experience is that happens with these defects of character. But I'll talk about it. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. That is powerful. I'm not alone. I'm not separated. That nearness is with me. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. And if I've spent some time in this book around step 1, it's like, hey, I needed one of those. I needed one of those, or I was going to die of this thing. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel that we are on the broad highway, capital B, capital H, walking hand in hand with the capital S, capital U, spirit of the universe. Right? And the last time we saw capital B, capital H, and capital S, capital U, broad highway spirit of the universe, was in we agnostics. And in we agnostics, when we were on step 2, these were just simply ideas. This, hey, maybe there could be a broad highway, and maybe I could join you guys who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And now it is not an idea, it is an experience. And I'm beginning to experience this. And so now we're here for the quiet hour. Pew, pew, pew. I really took us on a tangent and brought it back. Quiet hour. Yeah. That could be a metal band name. Quiet Hour. That wouldn't be a good name for a band at all. Anywho, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. Crazy. It's almost like I've really been prepping that quiet hour. And it's one of those things with my sponsees. I'm like, yes, an hour, an actual hour, like a full 60 minutes. Yes, an hour. And it's actually when I start working with my sponsees, I ask them to start building a meditative practice from the beginning. And I'm like, you'll thank me later. This is when I will be thanked. I don't get thanked for it, but I just want you to know that's when I have that expectation, which will lead to the resentment. But I spend that quiet hour, and it says, we carefully reviewing what we've done. So the purpose of this quiet hour is to sit with me and to sit with God and to have a look at the work that I have done up until this point. And it says we thank God. And any time in this book, it says we ask or we thank. What that is a prayer. Did you know there's a sneaky pre-step 5 or post-step 5, pre-step 6 prayer? I love the sneaky prayers. So it says we thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. And that's, man, I am just going to tangent all over the place, you guys. I hope you're with me on this. But just that knowing God better. So yeah, that's that prayer that I say when I come home and I set my timer for my quiet hour. I say, God, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart that I know you better. But you know how I was kind of bouncing around step 2 and talking about we agnostics? Well, before we agnostics, we read about how our solution, which is a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening. And there is a solution. It came from this renowned psychiatrist, Dr. Carl Jung. And the history of that is he was informed kind of about it by William James. But all of that to say is Carl Jung, there's this well-known interview where the interviewer is asking Carl Jung, hey, do you believe in God? And Carl Jung says, no. And there's a pause. And he says, I know. And so in step 2, the chapter devoted to step 2 is called We Agnostics. And the origin of the word agnostic is Greek. You guys are like, I was here for 6 and 7. I don't know if I was here for my Greek lessons. Please stay. But it's we agnostic. So ag in Greek is without, and gnosis in Greek is knowledge. So it is we without knowledge of God. But the knowledge that I'm after is not that head knowing. Gnosis doesn't mean, oh, I know. Gnosis means a deeper, inner, more personal knowing. That Carl Jung level of know. I know God. And so we are beginning, this process is a process of knowing this power greater than me and deepening and developing this relationship. And that power solves my problem. That power relieves from me the insane thought that I have to take a drink. And when I get to step 11, it says I seek to improve my conscious contact. And the word conscious, its origin is Latin. I just love the people that are coming in late and they're like, what? Why are we talking about Latin? What's going on? No, we're just talking about Greek. It's fun. It's fun. We're having a great time. But its origin is Latin. And the con in conscious stands for with. So in agnostics, it's without. In Greek, different language, weird coincidence. Or is it? But in Latin, it's with. Con is with. And the sire or the shus in conscious is knowing. And that's what I'm going from, this not knowing, barely believing. Maybe you guys seem happy and have a power greater than yourself, to knowing, to building and deepening this relationship with this entity that is not of me, but is a part of me and I am a part of. So in that quiet hour, we take this book down from our shelves and we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps, carefully reading the first 5 proposals. So what we're doing is we're going through each of the first 5 steps and we ask ourselves, have we admitted anything for which we're building? For we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? And so there's this beautiful archway that we can build a spiritual structure. But if I try to build mortar without sand, it's just going to fall apart. And so what I do is I set that quiet hour and I go through each step with me and God, and I review the work that I've done so far. Am I solid on my step 1? Do I see the hopelessness? Do I see that for somebody of my type, it's not about if I relapse, it's when, unless I have a spiritual experience. And step 2, am I willing to believe that there is a power? Am I willing to believe that that power that maybe I'm just starting to know and hopefully at this point experiencing, that it could relieve me of that insane thought, that for me to take that first drink? Step 3, did I really formally make the decision? In 4 and 5, was there anything that I missed? And here's the thing, oftentimes there is, and it's not a malicious thing. You know, sometimes we have that deep, dark secret and we go through that 5 and we kind of still hung on to it. But a lot of times what happens is I, especially my first 4 and 5, I cleared away so much stuff. And some of the big, heavy stuff, after my first step 5, I was like, oh yeah, that. And that's okay. We don't need to beat ourselves up. We don't need to fall into shame. What do? Well, a very good practical answer is call my sponsor and share it with them. That's a wonderful action that I can take. You know, and you know, I've done the quiet hour kind of a number of ways. One of the ways is where I've set a timer for 60 minutes and I just sit in that quiet with God and I ask the God of my understanding to show me what you need me to see about each and every step, and we go through. And another way that I've done the quiet hour is to set a timer for 10 minutes for each step. And I spend that 10 minutes on each step. And absolutely, if you can count, you'll notice that I cheat and I dip into step 6 because an hour has, 60 minutes of step 6. And I like to, in that quiet hour, have a real look at those defects of character and at those shortcomings. So after all that, to finally formally get into step 6, it says if we can answer to our satisfaction. So if I can answer those questions, is my work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have I been fearless? Have I been thorough? Have I given this my best go? If the answer is yes, wonderful. Let's look at step 6. And it says we have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. So one of the things, just to randomly kind of go back to step 1, 2, and 3, in step 1, I realized that my life was unmanageable, right? Because I don't know about you, I can't drink successfully because I have this physical allergy, and I can't stay sober on my own power. And I'm riddled with this spiritual malady, this spiritual sickness. And I was the one managing my life. And in step 1, I got a whole lot of evidence that I should be fired from the management position of my life. And so in step 2, I was kind of offered this possible new manager, right? That seemed to work in your lives. And I just believed that maybe it could work in yours. And step 3 was that formal pink slip. Like, I formally got fired. I am fired from the management position of my life. And I'm signing the employment contract. I'm going out and I'm going to work for the God of my understanding. But I do need a job. Like, I do now need to work. Like, I need to work in my life. So what does that look like? Well, there's a number of ways that we can approach it and have power, which is God. And it talks about, like, he is the director, we are the actor. He is the agent, he is the principal, we are his agents. He is the father, we are his children, those different ways. Now, he is the principal, we are his agents. An agent is somebody that is legally allowed to act on behalf of the principal. So it's an idea that as I go out into the world, I'm acting on behalf of God, which changes how I act in the world. But how I first read that when I was new was like agent, like 007, like spy, like, woo, agent for God. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go out and do some work. What's my next assignment? And it says next we launched into a house cleaning. So I think I'm going to do something really cool. And then immediately I'm like, house cleaning. So my spiritual house cleaning of, step 4 and getting it out. But I also like to joke that when I took my formal pink slip and I got fired and I got relocated into the willingness department. See, that is my department. So after I cleaned the house, I got moved. This is my new office, my new spiritual office, and my new spiritual job. My job is to be willing. And it says we have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. And what I was kind of hoping was that I could be in the results business. But I'm not in the results business anymore because that didn't work. So I'm in the willingness business. And so the thing is, defect removal, again, defect, shortcomings, exact nature of my wrongs, for me, they're the same thing. Defect removal is upper management, right? That's the boss, whoever's running the show. And we, dear Lord, that better not be me. Like, that's a disaster whenever it's me. So defect removal is upper management. And all I am asked to do is to be willing. And that is my experience. Step 6 is all about building and growing the willingness. And it is very simply, for me, a letting go. And it says, are we now ready to let God remove? So God is doing the removing. I'm not going to work really hard on my procrastination later. I'll do that later. Or I am going to get my anger under control. I'm really upset that it's not, though. Or, I am going to stop judging and being critical when he and she do what I think they ought to start doing. Oh my God. And the gossiping, absolutely. I'm going to stop that. But can I tell you about so-and-so, right? I don't have any power over this stuff. And my experience is the more that I try to control it and the more I try to manage it, the more I try to play God's role, the less it works. My job is to be willing. And I have this metaphor. And it works if you've either been an older sibling or a younger sibling, or you have kids where there's a bit of an age gap. So if this has either been you or you have kids that have this experience, let me know. But growing up, if you had a video game system, right? Like a video game system, maybe it was Xbox, maybe it was Nintendo, maybe it was Atari, and you'd have the older kid that was playing the video game, right? And they're like, I'm winning, I'm playing the game. And then the annoying little sibling would come up and be like, I want to play too. Let me play too. And so the older sibling, you got to have an age difference. It doesn't work if they're too close in age. But the older sibling would be like, here you go. Here's your controller. And it wouldn't be plugged in. And that is me. I am the little sibling with the not plugged in controller. I'm trying to manage things. I'm trying to control things. I think I know how it's supposed to be. I'm just going to exert my will. Look how good I'm doing it. I'm pushing all the right buttons and I'm pushing yours. Definitely. Right. But the controller isn't plugged in. And throughout this process, what I'm doing is I'm knowing and I'm trusting that there is a power that does have the plugged in controller that is running this whole thing. And so I am letting all of that go. And so it says, are we now ready to have let God remove those things from us, which we have admitted are objectionable? Can he take them all, every one? And so one of the things that I do when I receive fifth steps, what I do is I'll write down what I hear my sponsees say their defects of character are. And where I get that from is their fourth column, not from my opinions or judgments, what I hear them say. And what I've found too is that every defect of character can fall under the category of either selfishness or self-centeredness. And selfishness is how I act and how I behave in the world. And self-centeredness is how I think about myself and the world around me. So when I stole your car and slept with your spouse and peed on your carpet, that was selfish. When I was worried about what you'd think of me because I did those things, that was self-centered. That's just a good example. I didn't do those things. It was linoleum. I'm kidding. So with that, all of those defects of character I've found can fit under those two categories. But I like to write it out and I like to offer that to them so they can take that to their quiet hour and take that to their step 6 and say, hey, am I willing to let this go? All of this. Am I willing to let go of all of this? And am I willing to surrender all of it? Yes, all of it. Because man, there's sometimes I really like my dishonesty. And I bear with me with that. It's not I'm going to be dishonest. I'm going to tell you I'm so great. A lot of my dishonesty looks like not telling you the truth when I'm uncomfortable because my self-seeking needs you to like me for me to be okay. And I'm willing to let go of that, like the depth of that. And here's the thing. If I'm not, there's no judgment. There's no shame. If self-pity's been serving me, I'm like, who will I be without that? For example, no judgment, no shame. What do? We have a prayer. So this is the step 6 prayer. If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask. So I ask God to help me be willing. And that is my job in the willingness department, to pray for willingness. One of my other jobs in the willingness department is to take actions that I'm not fully willing to do. Just in case you're wondering, that's just another part of the job description that I have found being an employee in the willingness department. But so if I'm not willing, I just pray for the willingness. But one of the things is like, when am I the most willing to have these defects removed from me? Well, it's usually, just in my experience, right after I've shared with somebody, another human being, how they've ruined my life and how they've caused so much harm and destroyed, like my friends, my family, my loved ones. That's probably when I'm the most willing. The other time, at least from my experience, when I am the most willing is right before I have to go out and make amends for those defects of character. Right before that. How convenient that step 6 and 7 are nestled right in between 4 and 5 and 8 and 9. It's like it's prime willingness, at least for this little alcoholic. And so that's what I do, is I pray for the willingness. And again, step 7, what it is it's a prayer. And I'm just asking for it to be taken away. And so I'm going to read the prayer. And then what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is break down the prayer a little bit and just kind of share with you some of my experience with 6 and 7. And it says, my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. And what I want to start with is my Creator. My Creator. See, my first ever 5th step, I didn't have the directions to do a quiet hour. The sponsor I had at the time, she just didn't tell me to do that. And I was not experiencing the step 5 promises because I didn't have that pressure relief valve. I didn't have that action, that solution to lead into. And I was just riddled with, I am the worst human being that ever lived. And this is kind of a bit of a tangent. But I called my sponsor because I thought that was probably a good thing to do, having that reaction. And she's like, oh, just pray about it. And so that's what I did. I followed her direction of just praying about it. And then I slammed my finger in the car door. And a lot of people be like, that's wonderful. You slammed your finger in the car door. You weren't thinking about what a piece of garbage you were. And I have this thing called alcoholic multitasking. And this is my experience. My experience is that in my alcoholic multitasking, I can think what a piece of garbage I am. And boy, my finger really hurts. So that is my experience. And so what I found is that quiet hour. That quiet hour allows me that opportunity to turn back into solution. But when I did finally take the directions as they were taken out of this book, my Creator, I realized for the first time my higher power's absolute unconditional love for somebody like me, that I was created. And to create is to bring life to bring forth into the world my Creator. That implies love and that implies care. And it says, I am now willing that you should have all of me, all of me, good and bad. And that's the thing, is what I've found in step 7 is that my Creator wants all of me, not just the good parts. It's not about being good. It's not about being right. It's not about doing the moral thing. It's all of me. That speaks to me about God's unconditional love, all of me. And so what I found is in that 5th step, I had that stuff. I had that stuff that I didn't want to share. I had that stuff that riddled me with guilt and shame and remorse. I had that stuff that I thought I was the only person that ever did. And I thought I was the worst person to ever exist. And to come to step 7 and to see that my higher power wants all of me, even that. And not only that, will use all of me, not just the things that I think. See, if it was up to me, I would have some real good decisions about what defects I kept and what got removed. And that didn't work. That never worked. And so when we talk about like this unconditional love that I found, and it says, I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Here's what I think. I think the defects that I need to be removed are the ones that are causing me the most pain. But what I'm asking to be removed, it's a continuation of that employment contract. When I said I would go from here and work for the God of my understanding. Remove from me what is standing in the way of me being of use to you, God. Remove from me what is standing in the way of my usefulness to others. That is what I'm asking. And so here's my experience when I came to that first fifth step, and I was filled with that guilt, that shame and remorse, and I experienced that step 7 and that unconditional love. I started to really understand that the God that's on offer here is a loving God, a caring God. But it was only when I started to receive the 5th steps of other alcoholics, that's when I really, really began to understand how unconditionally loving the God of my understanding is. And what that looks like is that I sit down with another just human being, and they share with me the worst thing that they've ever done. They share with me that thing that they want to die behind, that they're drinking behind, they're using behind, that they want to kill themselves behind. They share with me that. And how I feel about them, it changes, but not in the way that you might expect it to. I begin to love them more. I begin to love them more. I'm a fall down failure of a alcoholic who smoked crack and wetted herself behind dumpsters. That is who I am. And I love them more. And I can't stay sober on my own power. And I can't get free of these defects of character on my own power. So I know without question, I'm not doing better than God. And if I can't do better than God, obviously, how loving might the God that's on offer here be? How unconditionally loving. And so it says, grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. I am going out from here to work and to be an agent for God. And that doesn't mean super agent, but I think that's still pretty cool. What that means is to be an expression of God's love in this world, to clean up the wreckage of my past. And as we get into step 8, we'll read about, more willingness. It's like I didn't get a promotion out of the willingness department. I'm still here. But what I want to share with you is an experience that I had. So for me, step 7 is really 6 and 7 is about turning to God and letting God remove from me those things that are standing in the way of knowing God. And what I do is I surrender it. I let go and I seek God in all that I do and all that I am. That is the action that I take. And there's times that the defects of character have fallen from me after I have amended them. You want my experience with things like gossiping is, and I do, by the way, I don't amend it directly. I'm not like, hey, talked crap about you. I haven't found that to be helpful. But when I've gone out and made those amends for that sort of stuff, man, it's fallen from me. And it really is that falling from me. And in my step 11 practice, in step 11, it says, be quick to see where religious people are right. Make use of what they have to offer. And for me, that was license to go and to try and to seek and to explore different spiritual practices. And so in my step 11 practice, I try different rituals and different holidays and different things from various faith traditions. And there was a New Year's ceremony that I tried, and what it is you grab some bread, and I grabbed some bread and to go to a place where there is running water. And thankfully I live where there's a bridge right over the river. It's only a few blocks away, and I go and I went and I happened to have a list of some of my defects. And I just happened to take them with me. And the purpose of this was just to kind of grow that step 11. And I heard about this and I wanted to try it and to do it respectfully. And so those were the directions, is to go and for me to sit on this bridge as the water of the river is flowing. And what I would do is I would rip off a piece of bread, and I'll let you know, at first I would throw them. I'd throw them into the river because I kind of wanted to see how far I could throw it. I'm clearly an adult, I wanted to have that experience, and I would throw it. And what it would do was it would land in the river and it would be carried away, and then what I would start to do is I would just hold my hand out And I would hold that piece of bread, that little piece of bread that I ripped off. And I would hold my hand out. And I would just let go. And it would fall. And it would fall into the river and be carried away. And that's what my experience is with these defects of character. That it is a falling, a letting go. And what I am letting go to is the God of my understanding, that is this powerful force that is taking them away with great love. One of the spiritual teachers that I seek from, because I do a lot of seeking, and she, in her writings, she lived in, I believe it was the 1600s. In her writings, she spoke about how that true union of God is the drop, the drop of water joining the river. And I thought that was such a beautiful description, to be one with the God of my understanding. And actually to tie in, here at the Big Book Compendium, I'm going to end on a plug, Steve. I'm just going to plug. We have the meditation thing. There's that meditation thing that happens at this group. Plugging it. I went to the last one, and we ended on a quote from Rumi. And I'll probably butcher it, but it's, I am not a drop in the ocean. I am the ocean contained within a drop. And it's not my quote. And I heard it coming here. And that's my experience. So hopefully I did 6 and 7 justice. If not, keep coming. And stick around for, I'm gonna plug the Big Book study that's next. Stick around. Fred's got it. Like, it's gonna be phenomenal. I hear doing it with Nick. It's gonna be amazing. So stick around for that. And thank you for the opportunity to be of service. I so appreciate it. Thank you.